Today, our topic of discussion is Westley Allan Dodd, the worst serial killer in the world. One of the most renowned serial killers in the history of the United States. Westley Allan Dodd's name will forever be engraved into the annals of infamy. A terrifying voyage through the depths of human depravity. Dodd's life began on July 3, 1961, in Toppenish, Washington, and continued until the end of his life. A terrifying reminder of the darkness that lurks within each and every one of us is provided by the narrative of Westley Allan Dodd, which begins with his turbulent childhood and continues through his horrible actions and ultimately his death. Before we get into it in more detail, click the subscribe button and like this video. Let's get into it. Dodd encountered a lot of chaos and hopelessness during his childhood. As a result of his upbringing in a dysfunctional household that was plagued by poverty, violence, and substance addiction. He had a childhood that was devoid of love, stability, and the appropriate supervision. The volatile relationship between his parents and the frequent arguments that they had created an atmosphere that was packed with tension and hostility. As a result, young Dodd was left vulnerable to the psychological trauma and emotional neglect that he had experienced. While Dodd was navigating the stormy waters of adolescence, the repercussions of his traumatic upbringing began to surface in ways that were both unsettling and problematic. He exhibited a troubling obsession with sexually deviant activity, particularly when it included minors, which would serve as a precursor to the horrors that were to come. In the beginning, there were reports that Dodd had predatory tendencies, which painted a worrisome picture of a young guy who was on the verge of moral collapse. Over the course of time, Dodd's deviant impulses only became more pronounced, despite the fact that intervention and rehabilitation efforts were made. A clear indication of the darkness that lay within him was the fact that by the time he was in his early 20s, he had already accumulated a criminal record related to the sexual abuse of children. Nevertheless, it wasn't until the late 1980s that Dodd's depravity would be fully released upon a community that was completely unaware of what was going on. 1989 was the beginning of Dodd's reign of terror, which would leave an indelible mark on the social fabric for all time. His method of operation was as methodical as it was nefarious. He would entice young boys with the promise of money, sweets, or video games, and then he would subject them to horrible acts of sexual abuse and violence. His victims, who were youngsters who had their entire life ahead of them, were deprived of their humanity and innocence in the most heinous and senseless way that can possibly be imagined. Cole Neer, William Neer, and Lee Isley were only three of the victims of Dodd's murders. Their names will be indelibly inscribed into the annals of sorrow for all time. The announcement of their deaths sent shockwaves through the neighborhood, igniting feelings of wrath and dread, as well as a fervent call for justice. During the time that the full amount of Dodd's depravity was gradually revealed, law enforcement agencies were preoccupied by the search for their killer, and the public was gripped by the investigation. As a demonstration of the depths of depravity to which Dodd descended, the specifics of the atrocities that he committed are too horrible to be recounted in their entirety. It is sufficient to say that his activities were driven by a poisonous mixture of lust, power, and a total contempt for the sanctity of human life. That is all that is necessary to say. Not only were his victims deprived of their innocence, but they were also deprived of their basic humanity, and they were reduced to nothing more than objects for Dodd's sick pleasure. Nevertheless, the most terrifying feature of Dodd's crimes was not the acts themselves, but rather his complete lack of regret or empathy for the people he perpetrated his crimes against. Over the course of his trial and subsequent incarceration, Dodd showed a callous disregard to the agony he had inflicted. He did not exhibit any evidence of regret or remorse for the actions he had taken. All of those who were there throughout his trial were able to feel chills run down their spines as a result of his icy and calculating behavior, which served as a striking reminder of the magnitude of human evil. In 1990, Dodd was found guilty of 3 charges of aggravated murder and condemned to death, which was an appropriate punishment for actions that were so heinous in their savagery. Despite this, Dodd continued to defy the standards of compassion and decency long after he had passed away. His last days were defined by a bizarre exhibition of defiance, as he delighted in the attention that was showered upon him by journalists, psychologists, and inquisitive spectators alike. Are you still there and watching? We'd appreciate that. You can also click the bell icon so you never miss any update from our side. Let's back to the video. His final days were distinguished by this demonstration. An end was brought to Westley Allan Dodd's reign of terror on January 5, 1993, when he was executed by hanging at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla, Washington. This brought some measure of closure to the families of those who had been victimized by him. In spite of this, the wounds that Dodd's actions have caused continue to be visible to this day, serving as a sobering reminder of the destructive potential that lies within the human spirit. In the years that have passed since Dodd's execution, his story has become the focus of intense attention and intrigue among criminologists, psychologists, and those who are interested in true crime. What was it that compelled a man who appeared to be a typical person to conduct such heinous acts of violence? Is it possible that he was a product of his surroundings, a victim of circumstance, or simply a cold-blooded monster who had no regard for human life? There is a possibility that the answers will never be completely known. But one thing is certain: Westley Allan Dodd will be remembered for all time as a representation of evil in its purest form, a cautionary tale of the darkness that lies dormant inside each and every one of us. His atrocities serve as a jarring reminder of the precarious nature of innocence and the significance of maintaining vigilance in the face of such heinousness. All of those who lament the loss of his victims may rest in peace, knowing that their memories will live on in the hearts of those who mourn their passing. This is it from our side. Share this video with your loved ones if you find this video worth watching. You have a great day.